Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris. His name is John Daigle. His name Ian Haritz. Gentlemen, we are back. The family, the band, we're back together. I've missed y'all.
It's been a while since we've all been in the same room.
Good to see you, Josh. Good to see you, man.
Everything good? I know you guys were at home last week, and a little vacation, a little time away from me, the studio, NBC Sports HQ. Daigle, what'd you do?
I ate a lot of meat, and now my stomach hurts.
So you went back home to Texas.
I went back home to Texas. That summarizes what you do back in Texas.
That's it.
It's amazing I survived 20 years of that place.
What's Ohio like, Ian?
It's a nice, affordable place to live, and we are better than Detroit and Columbus. That's kind of our motto. But yeah, and luckily they have Wi-Fi, so I got to experience not even Wi-Fi, national cable, 4 awesome XFL games. Fantastic time throughout the weekend.
All right.
Great product, fun time. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a football podcast. People will give you a minute on the XFL at the end of it.
Or 10, whatever.
I can just feel the tension radiating from this direction towards me about the XFL. But, we move. We figure it out.
Saturday was a good day. But what did you do while we were gone?
I worked.
We worked too.
I was here.
We worked too, just in different location. What did you do on the weekend?
That's a story for later.
Asheville.
Oh, you have a story later.
Yeah, that's a story for later. Later on this episode, I should, kind of outline this podcast a little bit.
You are the host.
We'll start off with news. Later on, we'll get to a segment, Give Me a Break, where we, need a break from some things happening in the football world and just the world in general right now. We'll reveal them to you. I do want to mention that, since the last time we've seen each other, we've added some hardware to these shelves back here.
We did.
I mean, Ian?
I thought we actually added shelves.
No, we don't. Well, it's been empty, so maybe we'll actually add one back there. This has been named the best fantasy football podcast by the FSWA.
It did.
Shockingly. A true underdog story.
Hey, I'm not surprised. All right, I'll stop it there.
I texted you that evening, and I said, hey, the footballers and JJ Zacharysen's late round podcast are on there. Like a couple of heavy hitters. We were the people who did not have a pre-written speech because we absolutely did not expect to win.
And we're on to 2020.
Okay. Well, no, let me gloat a little bit more. It's a great category. You mentioned JJ and the footballers. Harris Football was on there. Yahoo Fantasy was on there as well.
Amazing pods.
Yeah, it's cool. I've been on most of those, met the fantasy footballers as well. And these, it's just a cool group of people because totally. I think what's great about kind of this fantasy industry in some ways is that we all get along.
Guys being dudes.
Well, how it's not just overly competitive, and while sure you want to do well, I think we all get along. I also want to point out that it's not just the three of us that do this. It's RotoPat, it's Jesse, it's Anthony, it's Nick, it's Hayden, it's a whole bunch of people. And even before then, like this podcast has been going on for 4 years. I want to shout out Ray, I want to shout out Evan Silva, I want to shout out Rich Rebar because, without 2017, 2016, 2018, there would be no 2019 as well.
And it's you who does a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I keep telling everyone about that no one knows about because you're too quiet unless it comes to your bad dates. So yes, I agree. It is everyone. And I'm very happy. I'm very, very proud of it.
Thank you, Josh.
Well, thank you guys. This has been cool. I had only done it from my apartment with the train going by and noises that should not be in podcast format. So now doing it in a studio that Chris and everyone helped set up, it's taken it a step forward. I hear from a lot of people that the podcast has never been better than it is right now. So let's not let them down.
All right, well, we got to build on that now.
Let's start off with the news. That's how we're going to start this podcast. We'll kind of work, because we haven't spoken in about 2 weeks about news, so we'll kind of work from the most recent to the oldest. Most recent, Philip Rivers and the LA Chargers have parted ways. This has obviously been a long-time quarterback for the Chargers, back to when it was the Eli Manning, Philip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger draft. He had 2 great years in 2017 and 2018, Ian, but it certainly seemed like Philip Rivers, coming up in his age 39 season, has somewhat hit a cliff.
Yeah, and I don't think he got a ton of help from that offensive line, different factors going on. But yeah, it was definitely a step back after a couple years where it seemed like he was still getting a job done. 2018, still remember Keenan Allen kind of burning Gilmore early in that playoff game. It looked like they had a chance to kind of compete with the Patriots. Obviously wasn't meant to be. They took a step back last year. How many just disastrous end-of-game interception losses did we have to sit through with that 2019 Chargers team? But I'm sure we'll get to kind of potential top places for him, but just my favorite part about the Philip Rivers Chargers era was just he had to have been the most gifable quarterback of the last 2 decades. Whether it's, him sticking the head up in the air, closing the eyes, and just breathing in, whether it's him cackling at Jerry Jones, trash-talking Denver Broncos, Jay Cutler at midfield. Even if Rivers never made a Super Bowl, he was always one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the league, and oh my God, this guy was made for social media.
They're going to look completely different, just completely different next year. The fact that Rivers has started every game for the Chargers since 2006, and now they are going to be without perhaps him, perhaps without Gordon, perhaps without Ekeler, perhaps without Henry. We'll see how all their offseason decisions shake out. There's time for that later. But for now, we don't know what this offense will be. We don't know what this team will be. So without them, it's just going to be an entirely different set, a team in general.
Yeah, and we do know that Philip Rivers wants to keep playing, and he's been linked to the Indianapolis Colts. He's been linked to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He'll probably continue to be linked to a whole bunch of other teams. It is interesting, though, because this is a player who had this wild, awkward release, who, when you watch his game in isolation, it's these anticipation throws that are rainbows down the field that just had perfect placement to the receivers that were outside breaking routes, down the field vertical routes, that seemed to disintegrate this year a little bit. So I'm worried if there is still a winnable quarterback in Philip Rivers that's like a beyond 500 player, because last year he did finish the year with 23 touchdowns and 20 interceptions.
It's interesting because, we see Breeze, Brady, they continually, they're being so great extending their careers, but they've been making a living for a long time, throwing shorter passes. Now we have Rivers and Roethlisberger, who've kind of been the opposite, still around a long time, but living much more on those downfield deep shots. So I think it does make sense that those type of guys would experience more of a drop off the cliff.
And he just seemed like he didn't know where those anticipation throws down the field would land this year, and that's a major issue at the quarterback position.
Historically, it's still funny though, because we discussed this with Will Brinson. It's just weird since he kind of came up in the wrong era, like a very good player, but was always overshadowed by some of the greatest to ever play when it goes down between Brady, Breeze, Peyton. Just was always in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And that's why he'll likely go overlooked in so many categories once he finally hangs it up.
The man played a playoff game on a torn ACL,
yep.
one of the toughest players in the entire
And that's
league.
actually my most memorable moment of him, was that.
Yeah.
Jaguars next year are playing 2 home games in London in the 2020 season. These are going to be back-to-back weeks. That means just 6 in Jacksonville next year. Let me read a little snippet from the release that the Jaguars team site let out. In 2020, Jaguars season ticket members received a 50% discount on preseason games and favorable variable pricing on the 6 regular season games that will result in overall average ticket price reduction of 5%. Ian, what was your response when this came out? Because I believe it came out the week after the Super Bowl. And when you only have 8 home games for an NFL team, one that was just near the AFC Championship a couple years ago, to me, this is a major signal, a lighthouse point, where this team might not have the same support as they've had in previous years as they will in 2020.
It's definitely a problem. I mean, they've been doing this, though, for a long time. They've played 7 London games since 2013. I was kind of under the impression they've been doing well in those games for the most part, but I think that was just kind of a nice run they had because they're only 3-4 in those games. Obviously, Mr. Blake Bortles had a lot to do with that, so maybe Gardner Minshew can turn the thing around. But I don't know. Like their owner said, he has no interest, I believe, in moving the team to London because there's a lot of fire coming on him with that over the last 2 years. But the more they keep doing this, it's pretty clear where things are going. So, no, it does not look good for the future of the team in Jacksonville, that's for sure.
Despite what Shad Khan says, it's very clear the intentions are to try to get that franchise overseas. And remember, just a year ago, he was denied buying stake in Wembley Stadium because that's the idea. That's where they want to go. It just is another move in a offseason of moves that screams priorities are elsewhere besides winning. Even keeping Doug Marrone and GM Dave Caldwell around. It's very clear they have their intentions on trying to pick up this franchise and go elsewhere as opposed to winning in the immediate interim, which doesn't seem like there are a lot of hoops to jump right now.
Yeah, I've mentioned to both of you, and we talked about this during Super Bowl week off the air, Daigle, that their number one priority, I think, next year is not winning in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the moves this offseason that kind of dictate that. They retained a general manager whose team has a 36-76 regular season record underneath him, retained a head coach who has a 22-28 regular season record with the team. And again, they announced 2 home games in a different country in 2020 in back-to-back weeks. If we were, and Eric Stoner brought this up to me, if we were to imagine and create a franchise in London, I actually don't think it would be based in London. I think it would be based in the Southeast. And this is kind of a test subject where you can play 2 home games in London and then 2 away games back in the U.S. So a headquarters in the Southeast, then you play 2 away. Well, I guess it would be 2 home and then 2 away, then kind of go back to back to back to back with that through the remainder of the season.
Definitely easier to make that short flight versus trying to do it with the team from California or something. So if you're going to do it, I guess Southeast.
And it's a very small sample. We won't have an answer this year, but I am curious to see fatigue on back-to-back games. Like that second game, what kind of team, like is there juice that is noticeably not there? We'll see how all that plays out.
Vernon Davis has retired from the NFL. Vernon Davis had many memorable moments. Obviously finished his career with 63 touchdowns, over 7,500 receiving yards. The moment that always stands out to me is that 2012 divisional round against the New Orleans Saints. 3rd and 3, touchdown, down by 3 with 11 seconds to go. Starts crying on the sideline. It was Alex Smith. It was a Frank Gore team. It was a Michael Crabtree team as well, but it was a Vernon Davis game. And I mean, this is just one of the freakiest players we've ever seen in the NFL.
I just love his entire kind of career journey. Came out 6th overall pick in 2006 draft. And like you said, just combine metrics were completely just astronomical, but they didn't do anything his first few years in the league. I think, they just weren't throwing the ball. I'm not blaming him for that. Explodes for 13 touchdowns in 2009, 13 more touchdowns in 2013. And even once he was done in San Fran, we still had another 4 or 5 fairly successful years in Washington. I mean, I know last year he had the concussion, wasn't playing a lot, but that touchdown he had week 1 against the Eagles where he broke like 3 tackles and went 60 yards to the house. I mean, it was Ben Watson retired, Vernon Davis. These tight ends that are just freak athletes and can play wide receiver if you want to line them up like that, while also being a great blocker. I think Davis was one of the pioneers of doing that in the modern age.
I'm curious if both of you saw it the same way, because Davis came out even when Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates were still in their prime. But vividly, I recall thinking Davis is another monster in himself, just athletically, despite the fact those 2 tight ends were dominating in the red zone in particular. Did you view it that way as well?
For sure. And I don't think we're ever going to see a better athlete at the tight end position than Vernon Davis. 99th percentile on the 40, 98th percentile on the vert, 98th percentile on the bench, 96th percentile on the broad jump, 88th percentile on the short shuttle.
That crazy.
Insane.
I mean, the most ridiculous combine scores you'll ever see.
It's amazing.
Let's stick with the tight end position. Greg Olsen and the Panthers, much like Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, have mutually, let's put that in quotes, have agreed to part ways. The last 5 seasons prior to the last 3, he played in every game. Meanwhile, in the most recent 3 seasons, Greg Olsen missed 7 games, 9 games. He only played in 7 games, then 9 games, then 14 games. I was stunned by this, Ian. Greg Olsen is 8th among tight ends all time in receiving touchdowns. This is a player who was a safety blanket in many ways with Cam Newton, and with this changing of the guard, changing of the roster, rebuilding, some might put it, with the Panthers, Greg Olsen, it just makes sense for him to go elsewhere now.
He never had more than 8 touchdowns in a single season. I mean, it was just year after year, so consistent. I mean, even these final years, like last year.
Even last year.
Well, Kyle Allen, when he was on the field, he was still producing and doing his thing. Maybe he's not as big of a physical freak as he used to be, but I mean, certainly still a guy that if he wants to keep playing, I mean, by all means, it'd be nice to see him in more of a receiving only role. Like, don't do the Jason Witten, put the guy in the field for 97% snaps of the game still. But no, I think he's still got some more in him. And real quick, I was looking back, we talk about physical freaks, Vernon Davis. Greg Olsen is an underrated, just athletic monster. At the Combine in 07, 6'5", 254 pounds, 4'5", 340. I mean, Derrick Henry is 2 inches shorter, 7 pounds lighter, and ran a 4.54. So, like, I know we don't think of Greg Olsen as just this absolute monster. And, he's not that fast anymore. I get that. But in his prime, there were not many guys scarier running down the seam.
And he's since been linked to Washington, the Bills, and Seahawks this offseason.
I like Seattle.
Supposedly we'll have a decision by the end of the week, whether it's one of those 3 teams or the contract waiting for him in the booth. But yeah, either way, for fantasy out-wise, ideally Seattle is the landing spot. Otherwise, it's clearly been a great career, and we know he's going to thrive in the booth. He's already proven that.
Greg Olsen's always this example I go back to. He comes to mind with tight ends not succeeding on their initial contract or with their first team. Like, it truly is maybe the position other than quarterback that takes the longest to adjust to the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, during his time with the Bears, he was wasted. And in fact, he told the story that he believed he was going to the Patriots, was told he was going to go to the Patriots and get traded there if they didn't draft Rob Gronkowski. And then it was that same draft that afterwards he was then traded to the Carolina Panthers. And obviously just blew up in that Rob Chudzinski scheme. basically every scheme since then and has really, really improved. But I truly think it's not just him. We talked about Vernon Davis as well. It takes these tight ends a little bit of time to adjust the NFL, and Greg Olsen is probably the prime example of that.
And he was the first example of the 2020 new thing we're doing of mutually parting ways. Where it's very clear from a month prior, this thing is not mutual at all.
I will say, I think we're going to see Greg for plenty of years to come. He did XFL commentary this week. In the past, he's also kind of moonlighting some commentary roles. He's awesome on camera. So even, I don't know how much longer he plans on playing, but looking forward to what he's got afterwards too.
Yeah, some of us will see him if he's the XFL commentator. Some of us won't. Andrew Berry has been hired as the Browns general manager. If this name reminds you of an Andrew Berry, yes, it's the same one who was with the Browns just a few years ago, was with them from 2016 to 2018 under the Sashi Brown era, was then completely let go, disregarded, latched on to the Philadelphia Eagles, but now brought back. And now Andrew Berry is the youngest general manager in the league at age 32, Ian.
Yeah, and he's got the most dream background I think you could expect for a 32-year-old. Played football at Harvard, degrees in computer science and economics. He's been a scout with the Colts. This should be a guy that not only understands the salary cap, but understands just the intricacies of football. I mean, that was kind of the big issue with Sashi, I think. In Cleveland, people just weren't convinced he was a football guy. And I think Barry kind of blends those two lines as well as you could expect. My problem is, I don't care who and how good of a candidate it is. Apparently in Cleveland, if you don't turn the entire ship around in 18 months, you're probably going to get fired. They have had 10 different GMs since 2000. 10!
Wow. I think this whole offseason is just about aligning with the vision. And that's what you are talking about, because with Kevin Stefanski, with Paul DePodesta, with the ownership, it's all about finally having the same vision in line. But again, who knows that in 2 years, if they don't turn around into a playoff team, if the same group and structure is going to be put in place, because patience is certainly not a word that they have in Cleveland right now.
Exactly. And I don't know if it leads to success at all. But as you said, the ducks are in a row from the hierarchy down at least. And we'll see if it happens to lead to success. Baker Mayfield took some steps back across the board last year. They have a lot to improve this offseason. But we know the talent is in place. It's just a matter of getting that talent to perform at their best.
Russell Wilson has been on a bit of a media tour, especially down in Miami during Super Bowl week. He actually caught up with Mike Florio and Chris Sims. I want to play you this audio, guys, and then want to get your reaction, because we might actually be getting honest Russell Wilson here.
What is it about the Seahawks, and why do you got to drive me crazy every Sunday with oh, we fell behind and it's a big game, and now Russell's got to go crazy backyard football magic man. Yeah. What is it? Why can't we find that rhythm earlier in the game at times?
I think that's what we got to figure out. As we go on throughout this offseason, and we're trying to capture that earlier on, because I think we do it really well. I mean, we've always been really good at 2-minute offense. We've always been really good in those end of the half, those not always hurry-up situations, but those up-tempo moments. Yeah. The reality is this: I think the defense gets tired. First thing. I think the second thing is that I really know kind of what I want to get after them and how we want to get after them, especially in those moments. And guys just make plays in those moments. I think the freedom of just going after and just scoring as many points, that's kind of what the Chiefs do. To be honest with you, they do a really good job. Andy Reid and Mahomes, they do a really good job of getting up to the ball, playing with their playmakers, and finding a way to make plays. And they score more points than everybody else. And I think that's the name of the game: is can you score one more point than they do?
Yeah, so the freedom of going after them and scoring as many points, that's kind of what the Chiefs do. They score more points than anyone else, and that's the name of the game. Look, Russell Wilson, in his entire career, has been this team player, this one that doesn't seem like he wants to ruffle any feathers, that he wants to say the right thing in all formats. I think we're finally getting a Russell Wilson who's look, this is our window. We have a good team, but there were moments as a team that we were better than when we weren't. And when we weren't is kind of the identity that we carried more so throughout the season than this 2-minute situation, high-octane offense. I want to do that more often.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Look, Seattle has plenty of professional football coaches that have been in the game for decades and obviously understand the game at a much higher level than any of us sitting here. But literally, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. Those are the quarterbacks in NFL history that have been more efficient than Russell Wilson at throwing the football. And he just has never gotten the chance to keep throwing when they're not trailing. And because I guess the only assumption we can kind of come to that why are they not letting him throw the ball more is he is an undersized guy, so maybe asking him to drop back 40, 50 times a game isn't going to help him stay healthy over the long term. But there's no evidence that that's the case right now. So please, let's revolve this offense around Russ. You're paying him to revolve the offense around Russ, and let's see what happens.
It is nice to hear Russ be blatant and open and honest. Having said that, it's still Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll doesn't care that Russ averaged over 10 yards per attempt against Dallas in that playoffs loss. Pete Carroll doesn't care that Russ nearly averaged 9 yards per attempt in the playoff loss against Green Bay this past year. It just comes down to the play calling, and their mindset, as we've talked about time and time again, is to grind out one-score games, which is why they always play one-score games, and despite being inefficient on early down carries, establish their offense as such. And unfortunately, I can't imagine it changes despite what Russ wants.
Yeah, I mean, it must be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, it has to be, yeah.
You put your team in a position to win and in a position to succeed, and there are only 32 of these franchises across the NFL. And obviously, some are better run than others. Some are put in a position to succeed better than others. And while Russ is one of the top arguably 5 players at his position in the league, he's not afforded that opportunity as much as other teams are.
And here's my biggest issue with this entire Seattle team. You want to run the ball and you want to protect Russ. So that's your offensive line. Last 5 years, they've ranked 22nd, 21st, 16th, 31st, and 26th in spending on the offensive line. So if you want to be this run-heavy team that wins at the line of scrimmage, why are you not investing there? If you want to protect Russ, why are you not investing there? So whatever they want to do, please fix the line of scrimmage.
I do just wonder how much can actually change, though, and how much will actually change. A lot could change, but coaches rarely do. They rarely do look in the mirror. And it was such a big story this offseason with Sean McVay, who did look in the mirror and say, we have to change week to week. I don't think Seattle was changing week to week, year to year of who they are necessarily. Whenever they do, it's these big news items. And I don't know, because we're getting to this point with Russ, it's hey, this is the time. This is the window. If you're not going to win now, and sure, he has made multiple Super Bowls and played in a fantastic level with this kind of same formula, but the NFL changes every single year.
Quite honestly, the window may even be closed. Not Russ's prime,
right?
But the time to win the championships were his rookie contract, and now that's why they don't spend on offensive lines.
And not just his rookie contract, but the rest of the rookie contracts as well, because as much as I love the NFL draft, so much of it is luck and timing and kind of magic that can happen. And the Seahawks went on this stretch of a 5-year run or a 3-year run where they're able to get so many of these late round players turn into all pros and nail their first round picks that it kind of has turned into an unsustainable format, as we've seen with their first round and first pick busts, multiple year over year over year. So unless they hit that magic again, they have to think about it in a different way, because I think that was a major part of that early career success for Russ.
And it is important to know, as Russ said in that video, Seahawks have done a lot of winning. It's been good in Seattle. They're in every game. Even the playoff games they've lost, they come down to the last few drives. But as Russ also said, Super Bowl's the goal. They've been there. They want to get back there. So you got to make tough decisions.
They can. I mean, at points, this was one of the most fun offenses.
Russ keeps them involved every single year. They'll be in the conversation every single year, but as you said, the goal is to win it all.
Before we get to our final segment, as a good host, I should have mentioned that our offseason schedule is a little bit different. It's every Tuesday and Friday of the offseason. Guys, you remember that?
Yes.
Tuesdays. I record
Text
Tuesday, Thursday,
yeah, just keep
but the
texting
posting is Tuesday and Friday. And get involved. If you want to send us your comments, send us your questions, send anything like that. Now is the time for that. The season, every Monday's the same, every Tuesday's the same, every Wednesday's the same. It's a little bit different now. We have a little bit time to breathe. So we would like to, interact more with you. So interact more with us. Speaking of breaks, let's talk Give Me a Break. This was kind of sitting in the office on a Monday of the off season. An idea that I had where, right now, because there's not a lot going on, the kind of same news topics are being recycled over and over and over again. Ian, you're looking at me very earnestly. I feel like you want to kick us off here with Give Me a Break.
I'm honestly still impressed by your transition to get there. But I will kick us off here. So my football Give Me a Break is just everything that has to do with Taysom Hill right now. This man has already ruined enough of my Sundays, hoping Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas scores. And no, here comes in Taysom Hill on a jet sweep. He just scoots to the end zone. Was it 7 receiving touchdowns?
7 receiving scores, yeah.
And as a backup quarterback, the epitome of a modern day vulture in a league that doesn't really have your LeGarrette Blount types anymore, it's Taysom Hill. He is a millennial vulture. He ruins most of my Sundays, and now I get on Twitter this AM, and everyone's got an opinion on what he's doing. Taysom, he wants to play quarterback somewhere. Great. I don't care. He's 30 years old. He's on a team with 3 quarterbacks, and none of them are signed right now. Like, there are a million things in the NFL right now, or the XFL would be talking about, that are not Taysom Hill. I don't even have an opinion on him right now. I'm just tired of talking about the Saints' third-string quarterback for prolonged periods in February.
That's a give me a break. That's a true definition.
It fits. And as our friend Sean Payton, I mean, he's our friend now. Ian, sorry you missed out on that conversation.
He's everyone's friend now.
You asked him about Taysom Hill when we were at the Super Bowl, and he glows. And every time, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck would call a New Orleans Saints game, you could tell in the meeting rooms that Sean Payton would glow about Taysom Hill. But what always comes back to me, and sure, at nearing 30 years old, Taysom Hill might finally get an opportunity to start at quarterback. Maybe it's with the Saints because he's an ERFA. Basically, they get to tender him, and a team has to match whatever that tender is, either be a second round, it might even be a first round that they put on him, in order to sign him. No team's going to give up a first-round pick for Taysom Hill. But who knows if he becomes a starting quarterback? I don't know that right now. But what we do know is that this team, when they needed a starting quarterback, did not view Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback. In fact, he played the least amount of snaps when Teddy Bridgewater was a starting quarterback. In fact, Mohamed Sanu has more pass attempts in his NFL career than Taysom Hill does. Like, I don't know how anyone can have confidence in Taysom Hill is a starting quarterback in 16 games. Maybe he can get there. Maybe that's an amazing projection that people have. I just don't feel comfortable doing that right now.
I don't think I care until he gets multi-position eligibility, and then we'll talk. But until then,
And here's one thing. I mean, look, how would he be a successful quarterback? It'd be utilizing his freak athleticism. But what do we always talk about with Lamar Jackson? How good he is at picking up yards, not taking big hits, going down. Taysom Hill, you put him in the middle and a safety meets him head on, and he tries to run that dude over, which I love to watch. But when that's now your starting quarterback, not your wildcat kind of trick play quarterback, it could be a serious problem.
It's also one where, like right now, he's connected to Sean Payton, and that's a wonderful position to be into. What if Taysom Hill's a starting quarterback, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but like with a play caller like Brian Schottenheimer. It's a vastly different scenario where you have to give him the football 30 to 40 to 15 to 50 times a game rather than, 6 to 7 touches in a single performance. Things change drastically in that moment.
I appreciate he had the stones to come out and say, I'm leaving.
I
can't be a franchise quarterback, because players aren't that open. Having said that, even if he goes and becomes a franchise quarterback, right now I'm with Ian. I don't care. Yeah. Give me a break. I just don't want to talk about it.
I'll give you a break. I'm sick of flatly stating that no running backs deserve second contracts in the NFL. This was a big topic over the last few years with your David Johnsons, your Todd Gurley's, and your Ezekiel Elliott's. I kind of want to forget about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. It's a big topic this offseason with Derrick Henry and Melvin Gordon entering free agency as well. But to me, what it really comes down to, and why we can't flatly use the same brush to paint the entire running back position, is because soon players like Alvin Kamara and players like Christian McCaffrey are going to receive big second contract. And there's really like a tier to its own right now. It's that Zeke Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson category, which is $15 to $13 million a year. We would expect Christian McCaffrey and Kamara to receive more money than that. But in that same tier across other positions, Dee Ford makes the same amount of money, Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, C.J. Mosley, Alshon Jeffrey, Trumaine Johnson. To me, if I am building a team, I think winning football games, it's more imperative to have a player like McCaffrey, like Kamara, than any of the ones that I just mentioned. And maybe I'm just having a difficult time, Daigle, thinking of the Panthers and the Saints without their identities in these backs. But I just think they add a different element than many of the other running backs that I mentioned, that we can't just say, hey, they're running back, we can't pay them more money.
Being a capable pass catcher obviously upgrades any back a little bit. But for Christian McCaffrey, it's different anyhow, because next year in 2020, he already is going to have the 9th highest cap hit among all running backs. So what's another $10 million tacking on to arguably the most talented player at that position, and just having him on your team for the next 5 to 6 years? I'm with you in that, and it is because he is so talented and multifacets of the game, which is why you keep him around. But Derrick Henry, how do you feel on that one? Because
it's the passing game. That's the difference, right? I mean, we just saw Christian McCaffrey have 1,000 season. Now, it was a team with a losing record that has a top 10 selection. But there's a reason why they keep him on the field for 90+% of the snaps. It's because they don't have an identity without him right now. And I can't envision making your team worse by not signing him for an extra $10 or $15 million a year when these teams leave $10 to $15 million in cap space like throughout an entire season, and the cap rises $10 to $15 million every single year as well.
I just think in general we pay too much attention to positions. I know NBA kind of went under this revolution in the last 10 years. It's become more of a positionless league, and we're seeing that in football now with running backs like Kamara and McCaffrey that line up in the slot and out wide and present mismatch problems with tight ends like George Kittle and Travis Kelce, who the entire Super Bowl week, everyone go, well, no tight ends ever won a Super Bowl MVP. Well, we haven't seen many tight ends out of their offenses, like clear-cut number one receiver either. So, yes, their running backs like Zeke Gurley have proven problematic for salary caps. So I get the general argument, but when you have someone that affects the game in so many ways, like your Kamara, like your McCaffrey, I need more than just the argument that you don't pay running backs. It's not that simple.
Which we hear.
Yeah.
We do hear that a lot. And I understand the running backs in the Super Bowls were late rounders or undrafted free agents. And I'm not denying that, offensive line talent and play and continuity may be even more important to rushing success than the actual running back. But not perceiving and thinking that McCaffrey and Kamara are different than the rest. That's what leads me into
in a
this
couple
confusion.
years as well.
Yeah.
I just think it's also recency bias because Gurley, David Johnson, Lev Bell, the three highest cap hits next year among running backs, and all of them have questionable knees now. So I think people just look at that and be like, okay, we know now not to give any high amount of guaranteed money to a running back, where it's perhaps not the case for this next generation of guys that double in roles. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with paying those individuals.
Here's a question, Ian. Because, some people might say, well, if passing game is what you're looking for, you have your Olsen Ekeler, who's a free agent this year. You have Duke Johnson, who just signed a 5.5 per year contract. How much do you think there is a drop-off between your McCaffreys and Kamaras, too? Because, someone like Duke Johnson might cost a third of what those players do. I still think it's significant.
I think it is fairly significant, but I think that kind of the bigger argument with it is you got to reward your players that play extremely well for you. It's just going to be tough to convince free agents and other players to re-sign with you if you have guys like McCaffrey, who was on a terrible team all season that really had no chance at the playoffs, played all the way up to week 17, was handling 30 touches a game, putting his heart into every play, and you're just going to go, running backs don't matter, so we're not going to pay that guy? Just see how that public announcement and reception goes.
It's also bad news because Zeke is the next one we're talking about, but Zeke literally handcuffed an organization who knew they had all these uber important contracts coming up. So that to me was just bad business as opposed to making the wrong decision on the player.
That's totally fair.
It was the wrong decision.
Yeah, and even with what I said, signing him before Dak Prescott was the wrong move.
Yes.
So I am totally of the belief in that. Why don't you hit us with what you need a break from, John Daigle?
I need a break from everyone thinking Tom Brady's playing anywhere but New England next year because he clearly isn't. And I'm tired of wasting time on Raiders and Chargers' new stadium and, he's going to test the market. Bro, Tom Brady, yeah, I understand. We saw him. He plays winning football because he doesn't turn the ball over. But the one thing the Patriots have going for them is lore. And Robert Kraft will pay to keep a legend in-house. And Robert Kraft, for what it's worth, since it was Ian Rappaport who reported it on the NFL Network, saying that Kraft was the only person, or Kraft is willing to pay $30+ million to Tom Brady. Just the fact he's already come out and stated that makes Tom Brady and the Patriots the only logical link. Because no one else is going to give him that. At this age and at the style he plays now, no one's going to pay him that.
Here's my counter, because we had Tom Curran on the show during Super Bowl week as well. And Tom Curran said it's not Robert Kraft's decision now. It's Bill Belichick's decision now.
And Curran knows things.
And that stood out to me because, Bill wants to win. And if Bill thinks a different direction is the right way to go at quarterback to create a winning team and environment, I might listen to that. Now, it's still difficult for me to believe because even in the last moment, Robert Kraft can come down from his castle and say, yes, this is how much we're paying the best Patriot of all time, and he's going to remain in our staff. But right now, it seems like that distinction has not been made, Ian.
Statistically, 2019 was Brady's worst season since 2006. What'd they do going into 2007? They added Randy Moss, Wes Welker, Dante Stallworth. That's the situation they're in right now. We did not pay enough attention to Rob Gronkowski, the longtime Patriots #1 receiver, walking away. Edelman, look, he kind of kept the offense afloat for the first couple months of the season until he had the shoulder injury, the knee injury. They said he could barely get on the field when it mattered. N'Keal Harry, they drafted in the first round because they knew they had this problem. Even when he came back, wasn't separating. I mean, it's not like we were watching these games and there's just open receivers that Brady's just airmailing. It was just contested catches, tough, the entire, I didn't look at that Titans game and say, wow, that was Brady's fault. No, they allowed 13-some points. They couldn't score from the goal line. I just think we're being a little too hard in the situation. Brady's not the same quarterback he was 10 years ago, but with that said, I think he still got some football. And if they want to take him, I'm excited to see the upgrades they make elsewhere.
The other part of this is I don't think that there's an easy home either. There's not an easy destination where we can just pluck them from New England and put them in another one. Maybe if Tennessee wasn't going to re-sign Ryan Tannehill, maybe that's one. Maybe if the Dolphins were way better than they are right now, just because of the connections that they have from the Patriots' roots that they have. But, do we really think Las Vegas with John Gruden is the right spot for Tom Brady? Do we really think the Los Angeles Chargers with, bottom 3 offensive lines the last 2 years that Phillip Rivers played behind and declined behind is the right place for Tom Brady? No, and that's a major factor to me.
The offensive core around him is so much easier to address than under center in particular. So you give him his money, even though I don't even think he's going to get that much. I think he's still going to take a somewhat team-friendly discount, as he does every single year, to ensure playmakers are actually added. Because he said he's not re-signing with New England unless playmakers are added. So I think that's their number one priority. The defense is already in place, despite having to figure out a few free agent losses. But other than that, give me a break. I'm tired of talking about it. He's a Patriot. He's a Patriot lifelong.
Do we have enough topics to take another lap around the horn? Do we? Ian, do you have another one?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Some life? Is that
it is football, but it's also non-football.
It is the offseason. Say it.
It's football non-off-season.
It's the XFL, and I need a break on this specific XFL hate. Do not come to me and say the XFL is not as good as the NFL. It's non-comparative. It's different rules. It's a different season. Josh, do you go to a spring training baseball game and say, wow, Red Zone on NFL Sundays is so much better than this? No, because they're completely different things. And it reminds me of 15 years ago when if you'd be watching Raw or SmackDown, John, I know you're a huge wrestling guy.
Language now.
How many people go, do you know wrestling isn't real? Yes, I understand that. It's insulting to my intelligence when someone tries to explain that the XFL isn't the most high-level football product. It is February. There's no other football on. Oh, I like college football better. Watch college football in August then. I don't care. It's just astounding to me how people watch the Sunday games and say, oh, wow, that level of football is so much worse. That's never been the point. The point is we have football. We used to not have football during this time. It's here, and I love it. So do not tell me that the NFL is better than the XFL. I understand that. They're two different things.
Is this directed directly at me?
No, it's just Twitter in general.
So basically, give me a break from comparisons because they're just totally different. Got it.
Yes.
But you can understand why some people might not be interested in the XFL.
Sure. Just don't hate on it with a bullcrap reason like that.
I actually am angry from the opposite direction because I saw a lot of people, and this is a product I watch and support, and Ian and I are writing columns for XFL on Rotoworld, and I saw the blind support, what some people call tribalism, where it's XFL is the best thing I've seen in the past 5 years, going to overtake the NFL. It's dude, calm down.
Yes.
It's football, but it's not football, but also it's enjoyable because it's February. Just everyone take a seat back. It can be what it can be, and that is we're waiting for week 3 ratings, essentially.
Let's have this conversation, Ian. Because I think for me, one, I'm just footballed out at the moment.
Understandable.
So a week after the Super Bowl, I don't think I'm ready to learn new rosters, to learn somewhat new players that also were not good enough to make it in the NFL. And to watch, in all honesty, if we're comparing it to the NFL, bad football. Because it in some cases, it is bad football. It's not as enjoyable and entertaining. And for me, my personal journey of football has taken me away from college football a lot on Saturdays because I don't think it's as entertaining of a product as Sundays in terms of the quality of play. And so I'm not getting the same quality of, it was on the background, it was on mute, so it was there. I just didn't have any, it didn't grab me. It didn't pull me in.
All I'm asking though.
Okay.
Everyone's got 2 TVs here.
Or more.
That second TV needs to be on the XFL.
Okay, that's it. My turn?
Yes, let's go with you. Is this the story you teased?
No, my turn. Okay. So a first happened to me this weekend. I think I set a world record, gentlemen. I had a 3-minute first date.
3 minutes?
A 3-minute first date.
Okay.
So I need just a break from all of that. Whatever that is, I need all of that just done.
Are you going to describe it? Like what happened?
Do you
What
want
went
me
wrong?
to?
Just, yeah, what went wrong? It's 3 minutes. It's at longest a 3-minute story.
I mean,
Trying to think of the right joke to make with this.
so 3
Be
minutes.
appropriate, because I thought about it too.
So one, drove 30 minutes to this coffee shop.
Oh, you drove.
Yeah, well, I mean, I use a car and get to dates.
Coffee's the first mistake.
I don't want your commentary
Okay,
on
got
my
it.
date. I'm trying to tell you a story of this
Drove 30
fiasco.
minutes
You
to
brought
a
it up.
cafe.
Look, give me my time. She was going to be late. She texted me. I told her, that's fine. I will go get coffee. I will grab a table, and I will just wait. So then get there, we embrace. Hello, nice to meet you. Would you like to grab some coffee? She goes and grabs coffee. She sits down. I ask one question, and then she simply says, I think I'm going to leave. Chivalry and everything. And then gets up and leaves.
What was the question?
In that moment. It wasn't the question. I mean, one, I instantly turned the color of a lobster. Just was completely blindsided and flushed and totally red. And all you can do, I mean, you sit there in that moment, because it's a full coffee shop. You sit there in that moment, and you think like everyone's eyes are on you at that time. Of
course.
And I mean, I can't just I have this cup of coffee. So I sit there for 45 minutes just looking at the wall, just like
Tweeting about the Panthers.
no, but just like thinking about what the hell just happened. Because you hear about these horrible first dates. And I would say most of the time they go pretty well. This one did not. 3 minutes, got up, left, walked out.
Was it the question, or was the question just, it doesn't matter at all?
No, it doesn't matter. It was.
She literally just looked at you and heard your voice and
Let's
said,
not put it there.
and got up, and that was it?
Hold on. We're looking at this the wrong way. This was kind of best case. You not have to waste a second date. You not have to have an awkward hour-long date. It was 3 minutes. It sounds like you both are very clear about next steps, there being none, and you're done with it. So let's try to double that time next time.
That is a positive spin that I've not put on it yet,
Still
where
another
it wasn't going to look, it wasn't going to work out anyways. No, do you know what I think it was? Since I sat down and I had already ordered coffee, when she said chivalry, the only thing that I could connect it to is that I didn't get up, wait in line with her, and pay for her coffee before she sat down.
Well,
I mean, that's me trying. It just wasn't going to work though.
Clearly.
But just what a wild moment and experience in my life to have that.
It's like, it sounds like the, not Rounders, what's the Vince Vaughn casino movie? Both of you are
Rounders?
so
Not
bad.
Rounders.
Both of you are
Casino?
so bad with movies. Not Casino. Okay,
Vince
never
Vaughn
mind.
wasn't in Casino.
Forget the analogy then, never mind.
Okay, Daigle, you want to close this out?
Yes, I went a completely different direction. I may not have even understood the question.
Yeah,
to be
so
honest.
Daigle,
But
when we come up with themes the day before the podcast,
Yep.
and you aren't sure what a theme might mean.
I was sure until
why-
I started hearing your
Yeah,
answers.
why not just ask what it might be?
Because I was sure until I wasn't sure. That's
Okay.
why. But let's
I'm
just
so
let's just
excited
take
to see
this-
where you take
Let's
this.
see what directions this. So when I read a book, okay, I'm on a constant search, literally, to get lost and create walls. You get stuck reading something, and it's so good that you don't see the outside world. And I have felt this with Chuck Palahniuk's Haunted, which none of you may have read. Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I'm a big Cormac McCarthy guy. Silver Linings Playbook was incredible. And Ready Player One was the most recent example. Ready Player One is one of the best books I've read in the past decade. I thought I was going to be on another decade-long journey to get lost like a child again. But give me a break, I wasn't. I found another, was that incorrect?
How are you connecting this to Give Me a Break, which we've
Give me
had?
a break, I found another good book. Give me a break,
God.
I found another good book, and it is Edward Bunker's No Beast, No Service, a crime novel that I just saw someone, I think it was actually Mark Sessler from around the NFL,
Yeah.
tweet about it. This is how I get my book suggestions, by the way. Someone I respect tweets a cover image, and I literally just look it up. Oh, that sounds good, and I grab it and start reading it. And I can tell you, I can attest, I got lost in it.
And do you know what I think just happened?
I don't know.
Daigle wanted us to know that he reads.
Was that a humble brag?
I mean, that's what I took from that entire conversation.
I'm reading Mike Leach's autobiography
Humble brag.
because football never stops, Josh.
Y'all are wild. Okay, that's going to do it for us. We'll have another fun topic on Friday's episode of this podcast. Plus, guess what? Roto Pat joins
Roto Pat is back
this
as
week?
well.
this week. Not in studio. No. We're going to get him on the phone for like 5 to 10 minutes. Pat's going to have his own segment of the show each week.
Wow.
I'm
I know.
terrified. I'm
That's up the
absolutely
ladder.
terrified.
Is it Pat on Twitter but in real life?
Yeah, I guarantee. No, this is what I
terrified.
guarantee happens. He starts off with a joke that doesn't land,
Yep.
and then reads one of his tweets that he tweeted that day.
Yep.
That is the Pat segment in a nutshell. That's
But then we have
gonna
another
happen
8
on
minutes
this
to fill,
podcast.
so let's hope for the best.
Appreciate everyone out there tuning in. Again, if you enjoy this podcast, rating and reviews, telling one friend really does help us out. We'll talk to y'all soon on Friday. Till then, talk to you next time.